All right, in this video, we're going to talk about the actual experience of Brahman or non-duality. This video is going to be all about explaining the experience of what it really means to rest as the truth, which is to realize your true self. We're going to talk about this in the most precise way as possible so that there is no room for misinterpretation in this video. After this video, you will know what it truly means to realize the self. Not only that, we're going to explain the symptoms or the experiences that you're going to have leading up to that realization. Because these experiences are not the experiences that most people have in this physical reality. These experiences are something that you will need to reveal as mystical experiences leading up to the realization of who you truly are, or which is the experience of non-duality. While this video might seem valueless because we're just talking about experiences and not actual methodologies, techniques, practices, or any type of teaching that helps you purify the mind to realize that truth directly, this video is meant to be more of a motivator. It's meant to be more of an understanding that you can gain so that you put in the effort or the bhakti or the dedication to seek that truth. That is going to be the value of this video. But it will essentially help you understand why it becomes necessary to practice. Why practice is absolutely necessary. Because without practice, there is no way of breaking the conditioning that you're having when perceiving this physical reality. So this video is going to be all about experiences. Right now, you're experiencing a tangible world. You're experiencing a physical world where you can touch things, where you can taste things, where you can see things. You're not just seeing things, you're seeing things miles away from you as if you're some limited form that is separate from everything else. And as if this limited form is actually a concrete individual that you believe yourself to be. That is what we refer to as the waking world, or the gross body, or the physical body, or the annamaya kosha in Vedanta. That's what that means. When we say this is the gross body or the physical body, that doesn't mean that it's an actual body. That doesn't mean that it's an actual form. That doesn't mean that's an actual entity. It's really just your awareness aware of a projecting form that perceives itself as physical. See the difference there? It's your perception. It's not an actual body. It's just your perception that's enabling you to experience or see or believe that you have an actual body. That is what we refer to as the waking state, or the physical body, or the gross body, or the annamaya kosha of Vedanta. It's just a way to explain the physical body, but the body is not physical. It's not physical. Don't look at it as some physical body, because in truth, it's just awareness, aware of perceiving a physical body. That is different from there being an actual body. Nonetheless, we all live life like this. We all go about our day seeing ourselves as this human being that's walking through streets and avenues and making our way toward a specific destination and continuously trying to find happiness outside of ourselves in the form of gross objects that you believe to be actual objects, things like cars, things like houses, things like going inside of a building and having the perfect job, like all of these beliefs, all of these notions that we've subconsciously gathered throughout all of these dreams now enable us to see life in this manner that we're seeing it right now. That experience is a deception. It's a deception. It's not really real. It's more of a story. When we say a story, we're saying that it's an imagination. It's an imagination that's happening in your mind. And it's not an actual objective world. It's just a story. But so long as you keep experiencing things with your senses, with the different functions of the mind that consciousness is aware of, but now is sucked inside of those functionings, this intelligence that now enables it to see itself as this individual inside this physical world, that entire process is just a deception. It's just a deception because really there is just consciousness. If there is only consciousness, then what you're perceiving right now is actually not real. It's actually not something substantial, tangible, physical, material. It's none of those. There is no such thing as those things. They're just functions that's happening in an immaterial intelligence that's enabling itself to see itself as some tangible form, which it's now seeing. That experience that you're going to continue having as a physical body, experiencing this world of objects, is the perception of physicality. And that's what most people are holding on to right now. This only means that if you want to start turning away from that deluded perception, turning away from that truth and revealing something at least more truthful, there needs to be some way for your consciousness to drift away from that dream. Because right now, consciousness is knowing a dream and it's lost itself inside of a dream. So to turn away from that intelligence that perpetuates that deluded experience, which we refer to as the waking state, the gross body, the physical body, the annamaya kosha, it needs to remove itself from those senses or those functions to see itself as something more truthful, something without those functions. So by practicing, by doing some type of practice, we're not going to go into great detail. We could save this for other videos. There needs to be some practice to take your attention and just completely forget about physicality. You have to completely forget about it. Forget about it so much that you're not experiencing the senses anymore. You can't touch things anymore. There is no person that's touching anything. See, the functions of this immaterial mind, this immaterial intelligence that's truly empty, the functions that it holds allows us to see things as if it's tangible. But if we're no longer immersed in those functions, things start to feel differently. They start to feel as if it's made up of nothing, because you only believed it to be actual something because you were immersed in that intelligence, in those functions that enable that perception to make you perceive physicality. If you're still entertaining that, you're just being conditioned in the experience. So you have to find a way to break free from it. This is where practice comes in. So whether the practice is pranayama, the practice is asanas, the practice is mudras, the practice is mantras, the practice is whatever the practice is, it doesn't matter. You just have to take your attention and turn it away from this intelligence that enables that deluded perception. If you don't practice something, then your attention is still immersed in the dream. It's still immersed in this reality. And deluding you to believe that it's actually physical. So you have to break that conditioning. This is where practice comes in. You're turning away from the intelligence and you're reaching the inner parts of the mind. Things start becoming immaterial. They're starting to be seen as empty, as if there was nothing that's really there, but it's appearing to be there. See, with the perception of physicality, you're stuck in a projection and now have crystallized it into some form when it's never a form. It's always empty, even when it appears to be crystallizing into an actual form. That is always empty throughout, even if that's happening. Even if you're seeing a crystallized form, it's always empty. Well, now you're revealing the truth of it. Now you're revealing the truth of that in your experience. You're starting to see that you can't feel things that are tangible anymore because you're turned away from the senses. If you're turned away from the senses and any of the functions that's enabling you to perceive a physical world or a physical body, then you start to see things more empty. This is when you're experiencing the energy body. In Vedanta, they call that the pranamaya kosha. That's the prana. You start to feel more expansive. You start to feel like you're not contained in this body anymore. Things become expansive, like your awareness is now aware of much greater things around you, as if everything starts to become connected and you're able to see and experience that connection. That's what it feels like. That's just my way of explaining to you what that experience is like. There's many other people out there that explain it differently according to their experience, according to the knowledge that they hold. But nonetheless, it's just an experience of feeling yourself as energy. And what exactly is energy? It's nothing really. It's just an essence that merges into the perception of physicality. In other words, energy has turned into matter. But even when it turns into matter, it's never matter. There is no actual matter when it's turning into matter. It's just a diluted perception. It's just you believing energy to be matter because it's really made up of energy. If matter is made up of energy, you're just believing the energy to be matter, and now it's become matter, and you don't want to even question anything about the energy, right? Just like you don't want to question anything about the prana. The prana. No one talks about prana, but that's the prana. It's like you're turning your attention away from being contained in an object and now identifying as something much greater, like space. It's like turning into space from being an object. It's like being this object and now identifying as space. Well, if you're identifying as space, then how can you see yourself as this limited object when you're the very essence that makes up those limited objects? Right? Things become more expansive. You don't feel with the senses. You feel as if you're made up of energy. This is a more truthful aspect of who you truly are, but you don't see it that way right now because you're perceiving physicality. You're perceiving things of a tangible nature. This is why practice becomes crucial. Or else you're going to be stuck in this deluded perception that's enabling you to perceive life as if it's an actual world, as if there's actual planets, as if there's actual galaxies, as if there's actual stars, as if there's actual clusters. There is none of that. It's just an idea or thought in this mind, in consciousness. We only term it the mind because of these thoughts, but without the thoughts, there's just consciousness. There is no such thing as a mind. But we'll get there. Start to see things more expansive. You're identifying a space, so you no longer feel as if you're contained in the physical body. If you're no longer contained in the physical body, it starts to feel like it's some abstract experience, some geometrical experience, some experience where there's less boundaries. Things become more infinite, boundaryless. There's less separation. There's only a hard experience of separation when you're immersed in the gross body, or in other words, you're holding the perception of physicality. Things become very separated because you see things as actual tangible objects separated from each other. That's why ego is strong. When the ego is strong, there's more selfish behavior. There's more egocentric behavior because you're actually believing yourself to be this limited being, and you believe it so much that you now see it as superior to other things. That's all just delusion. In Vedanta, they call that ignorance. You start to feel as if things are more energetic. It's like a trance, if you want to put it that way. It's a trance in a sense that you're sort of intermingling everywhere at once, right? You start to see that you're not contained in this body. If you're not contained in this body, it's not going to be so much of an experience where you're seeing things outside of you, right? And that outside of you is completely separate from you, as if nothing of that essence can touch your essence. It's their tangible separation. It's a distance apart. Well, when you're in that trance, there is no distance apart. It's almost as if you're one. You start becoming one with all things. There's just intelligence now in the air, an intelligence in the air where you can understand and know higher knowledge. What does higher knowledge mean? Well, when you're experiencing physicality, we don't say that's really higher knowledge because it's the most diluted form of perceiving things. In other words, consciousness being formless and infinite and omnipresent and omniscient and just all pervading. To see itself as this actual physical form that's limited, inferior, and all of the opposite things, it's therefore the most diluted perception. That perception of seeing yourself as physical is the most diluted form of experience you can have because it's turned formlessness into actual thingness. And because it's done that, you now forget who you are and you identify as someone who's completely false. Completely false in the sense that it was just a character, but now you made it your character, and you've made it your character so much you not believe that it's actually you. Turning away from that though, and you reveal a much subtler aspect of existence. You reveal the subtle body. Now, just like energy was able to create this perception of matter, which is all just a perception, nothing actually happened, nothing actually turned into something, it's just a perception that dreamt it turning into something. That same energy sort of merges into the complete subtle body where it's just now the mental space, right? In Vedanta, they call it the subtle body. They also consider the prana the subtle body as well, but as prana is really just the essence in the middle that crystallizes into matter, but also merges into a complete subtle world where it's not reliant on energy. You could say that everything is made up of energy, but when you're in a subtle body where it's completely subtle, there is no energy. Energy is just some thought, because in this space, there's just thoughts, there's just emotions, there's just desires, there's all of these things that we're experiencing right now, but without the perception of physicality, right? This means that those type of mental experiences that you're having, such as tasting something, such as hearing something, such as knowing something, all those things are just knowing something. You're knowing the taste, you're knowing the touch, you're just knowing the experience. All of that knowingness is in the mind. It's in that mental space. It's just void of perceiving things physical. So any type of knowing something, like knowing this cat, come say hi, knowing this cat, it's just the knowing without actually feeling and seeing that the cat is separate from you. It's as if you're seeing the cat as a dream and yourself as a dream. You're no longer knowing the experience in that manner. You're knowing it in a sense of being much subtler. There is no feelings of physicality in this realm. If there's no feelings of physicality, that's your experience. If you're experiencing that and you're not experiencing something that's physical, something that's materialistic, something that's tangible, it's not the physical perception. It's the subtle perception. It's the perception of subtlety. This is the type of perception you have when you're dreaming. You're having it when you dream. In other words, you're revealing the subtle body when you dream, because when you dream, you're in this dream world, and this physical body is not something that is existent anymore. You might think that it's there laying in the bed and falling asleep, but no. That's not what really happens. Your consciousness just turned away from the physical state and now is revealing the subtle state, the subtle body. If it's revealing the subtle body, it means the subtle body is right there, right now, as you perceive yourself to be a physical body. It's there right now. It's what's projecting this illusion of physicality. The subtle body is the physical body in truth. In other words, there is no physical body and then the subtle body. It's just the subtle body presenting itself as physical. It's the physical body is actually the subtle body. That's what it really means. These are not separate things. It's just one consciousness the entire time. If there's just one consciousness the entire time, that's how it's designed. Everything is superimposed, meaning every type of experience that you can have that transcends the physical body is something that you're experiencing in the mind. It's in consciousness. It's not somewhere, it's not something out there that you're experiencing. You're just experiencing the entire time in your mind. I'm just pointing to the head. I'm just giving you a sense of direction that it's in the mind. Where is in the mind? It's not necessarily in the head. It's just, it's nowhere. It's locationless. There is no location, right? We only use locations like head and stuff to point it, to point where it is, because there's nowhere else to point it to when you're in the physical world. Like when you're in the physical world, you have to point it somehow, and that's where we point it to. But in truth, it's locationless. In other words, when you dream at night and you're in the dream world, where exactly is it happening? Where exactly is all of that happening? It's happening nowhere. You can't say that's happening somewhere. It's just happening, right? When you're revealing the subtle body, you're revealing something more truthful. It's like, this is it. This is something that I already know. I just forgot it when I was experiencing physicality. And now you're there and now you know. But as soon as you experience physicality, you completely forget about it. But you know it. You know the truth of the subtle body. You've just forgotten. You're just not remembering clearly. And that's why a practice becomes necessary to allow you to remember it. Because the only way you can remember it is by experiencing it. So you have to turn your attention away from physicality, away from these functions that enables the perception of physicality, and turn it into something much more subtler, something that's more dreamlike, something more serene, something more pleasant, something more joyful, something more blissful, something more comfort, something that's much more comfort. You feel as if you're secure. Why? Because there is nothing to fear about physicality anymore, because you're not experiencing physicality. You know that there's something that's much more truthful to your existence that is beyond physicality, and now you're seeing it in your experience because you see that you're transcendent of the physical body. You see that your awareness continues even after this apparent death of the physical body. Nothing ever truly dies. What dies is a character. What dies is a role that you once played. Once you finish that role, you move on to this other role, and that is your experience. The other role is the experience, just like the role you played was the experience. It's just different roles. Nothing truly dies. You just keep going from role to role to role to role in different aspects of existence. If you keep your perception on physicality for the most and you don't realize a much more truthful aspect of existence, or you don't reveal it because you lack the necessary power to reveal it, you're going to keep being stuck in this physical perception, and it's going to keep revolving, because that's the nature of samsara, right? Samsara is just a dream that's continuously going in cycles. It never ends unless you break free from it. If you don't break free from it, then you're just stuck on the cycle, because it's either the cycle or you're free. If you're not free, you experience yourself being in the cycle, and you're experiencing it right now as a physical body. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just means you're lost and you desire it. Ultimately, you're lost because you desire being lost. And here you are. You have to reveal these states, because if you don't reveal them, then you're just stuck in this perception of physicality, and it keeps on going. And because it keeps on going and you haven't done the work to break that conditioning, you're going to be stuck in this cycle that keeps going on and on and on. It's a switch from subtlety to physicality, and then back to subtlety, and then back to physicality, and then back to subtlety, and that just keeps revolving, because that's what happens when you die as a physical body. The physical body is just a perception change. It's just you shifting perception from physicality and now revealing subtlety. That's all that's happening, because that subtlety is already there right now, even when you're perceiving physicality. In other words, even if you believe yourself to be the physical body, you're actually the subtle body. You're actually the subtle body, but you've forgotten, and now you believe yourself to be the physical body. So when you die as a physical body, there's no longer the physical experience. You've changed your perception, and now you're experiencing subtlety. You're holding the subtle body. So you should have never feared death. Why should you fear death if you continue your experience? Why should you fear death? Most people fear the attachment. They don't want to be detached to that character, because they've built up all these conditionings. They're now so intimately connected with this character because they believe it to be themselves, and now they're stuck on it, and they don't want to let it go. They don't want to let it go. So they keep gravitating towards that body. That just means there's attachment. And when there's attachment, you're glued in the cycle that keeps revolving. And so you're going to keep going from subtlety to physicality to subtlety to physicality. That keeps going on endlessly. But nonetheless, when you leave that physical perception, you reveal something that's subtle. And so people refer to these places as heavens, as heaven. The thing is, that's just something that's temporary, because you're going to have to shift again to physicality. This is the cycle of reincarnation. This is what happens when you incarnate. Nothing is ever incarnated into an actual thing. It's just your perception that's changing. The more you're able to reveal the subtler aspect of yourself with mastery, that just means that you're not glued on this cycle that's taking you from physicality to subtlety, back to physicality to subtlety. You've learned, or you've mastered the art of turning away from that experience. So you're not someone who's glued on that cycle. This is why practice becomes necessary. There needs to be practice to eventually have mastery. If you don't practice, how are you going to have mastery? Just like you don't practice a specific sport, how are you going to be good at it? How are you going to be a professional basketball player if you haven't even played basketball? You have to play basketball. You have to keep playing basketball. You have to keep learning how to play basketball, master basketball in order to become a professional basketball player. Just like that, you have to learn how to break free from the conditioning of seeing physicality. Again, this is why practice is important. Nonetheless, you feel the experience of subtlety. You're in the mental mode where you're just intimately entangled with an intelligence that's giving rise to those experiences of desires, of memories, of all of this data that you've carried, that you've held when projecting into this physical world or seeing things as physical. This data you become more intimate with. It's this imaginary intelligence. It's just this intelligence that's allowing you to know something much more higher. This is the higher knowledge. This is the mystical experiences. When you find yourself in these so-called realms, which is just being intimate with intelligence, intimate with data, you start seeing things that you normally didn't see when you were holding yourself as a physical being. Because when you're holding yourself as a physical being, there's certain laws that is non-separate from the experience. Laws like separation, laws like gravity, laws like things have boundaries, all these different laws that enables this classical world. Take your attention away from that, reveal the subtle body, get intimate connection with this intelligence, and you're now seeing things differently and operating in a completely different manner. Because now there's things like telepathy. Now there's things like seeing different lives. Now there's things like accessing past memories, accessing future memories, accessing all memories that already exist in that present space. And you're tapping into these records, into this knowledge of experiences that can be experienced. And see, all along, you were just experiencing one of those things. That data, you're able to see that data, know that data, understand, grasp that data intuitively in these mental spaces, in these mental worlds, in these realms, in this intelligence. You're revealing the more inner parts of the mind, right? Here we're getting into the manomaya kosha, right? The mental space. This is what Vedanta refers to as the manomaya kosha, as one of the koshas as part of the panchamaya koshas, the five koshas. The five koshas are just ways to experience perception. There's just ways to experience perception. See, the sages, the rishis, they came up with these words because they're experiencing life with those perceptions, and they put it down on paper to explain it, right? When you're experiencing the perception of subtlety, you're accessing intelligence, and because you're accessing intelligence, you're accessing data, and that data can be manipulated. It can't really be manipulated when you're experiencing physicality, which is why people don't believe in these subtler worlds where there's higher intelligence. They think it's woo. They think that it's stupid. It's only because they're deluded and seeing a physical world and seeing matter. It only means they have a perception that's enabling them to see things that's physical, and they only believe things to be physical because they're so immersed in it. And they haven't practiced or developed the mastery to uncover the truther parts of your existence, the subtler aspects of consciousness. But that's okay, because it's everyone's destiny to unveil those truths. But there has to be a means for you to uncover those truths, a means, an experience or an event that happens in your consciousness that allows you to take the story in a different direction, in a direction that leads to your true self. And this is one of the reasons I'm putting out this video, so that it can change someone's direction, or at least someone who's ready for it. So ask yourself, are you ready for it? So you uncover these subtler aspects of existence, this existence where you can communicate to others. You still perceive others, but there's more of a connection with others. Because there's more of a connection, you're able to communicate to them thought to thought. It's not like you're sending out a voice signal that's going out there and going inside their head and has to get processed in their head for them to understand, and then for them to say that and then the voice signal travels back to you, and then you process it in your head. No, that's not how it works. That's just an understanding that you believe to be in physical reality. That's not how it works in the subtle worlds. When you're in the subtle world, the minute you have a question or a thought and it's directed towards someone, it gets answered in your mind at once, spontaneously. It's like you've asked a question to someone, they listen, they respond, and that happens in a split second. So the thoughts are answered in your mind. That's why there's never any type of miscommunication in those higher worlds with higher knowledge. That's all happening in your perception right now. That's locationless. You see how there's always Brahman, even when all of this appears to be happening? But that's a truth that you have to uncover yourself. And in order for you to uncover it, you have to go through these mystical experiences to get to that final truth. If you're not going through these mystical experiences of going into these koshas and going into the inner parts of the mind, then it only means your perception is stuck on physicality. You might be understanding something intellectually, but it's understanding it while you're perceiving physicality. That's still ignorance. That's not going to do anything for you to experience the truth. You have to apply the knowledge and take your attention away from the intelligence that's enabling some illusion that you've given yourself into. Feel yourself to be more expansive. Feel yourself to be in the subtle world where you're experiencing beings that you're connected with, and the multitude of beings that you can come in contact with. Angelic beings, sages, guides, masters. Just like the hierarchy that's here right now in this physical world, there is a hierarchy in the spiritual world. And that hierarchy is just in the spiritual world, the more powerful you are, the more mastery you have, the more enlightened you are, right? The more truth you know. That's the hierarchy. You have to go in that direction, right? The highest beings with the highest knowledge are the beings that's one with Brahman. If they're not one with Brahman, they see themselves as a individual being, and they'll experience that individual being in a certain aspect of existence. In other words, either they're experiencing that being as a physical being, or whether they're seeing that being as a subtle being, as an astral being, as a causal being, all these different aspects of existence, but it all ends with the truth that there is only Brahman. And for that to happen, you have to lose your sense of individuality. But we'll get there. These subtle worlds is a subtle existence. You're essentially taking your attention into different dimensions. I say dimensions because you're not actually traveling from one place to the other. That's never happening. It might appear that way, but once you start revealing the much subtler aspects of existence, like the causal worlds, there's causal worlds, and there's the complete causal world, which is known as deep sleep. That's what we refer to as the Ananda Maya Kosha, the bliss sheath. There is causal worlds that starts to create reality and generate reality, but it's all held in a concentrated space. It's held as a potential. The minute your awareness goes from potential to creation, it finds itself in these pictures. I say pictures because they're not actual worlds yet. They haven't. Your perception hasn't been diluted enough to see itself as an actual world. It sees pictures like flashes of knowledge, and these pictures are all happening in awareness. And because there's only awareness and awareness is formless, it means all the pictures are in a superposition. They exist all at once. They're always existing all at once. There's never a moment where they're not existing all at once. In other words, every single event, every single experience, every single possible outcome that you could find yourself in experiencing this world of duality is all there right now. Nothing is actually being created new. It's not like if I walk and pick up this pillow, this is a completely new experience that just happened just now. that moment that happened is also superimposed in that now, in that completely still present moment. That is all that exists. In other words, there is no past and there is no future. Those things don't actually exist as actual things that happen. There is no such things that happen in the past as if there is a past, or likewise with the future. It's all just pictures of every possible thing that can happen, all being played at once. So when you're in these causal worlds, you're finding yourself in these thoughts, and since you are in that subtler, I can't say subtle world, you're in a causal world where those pictures eventually manifest and become crystallized into a tangible world, which is all happening in your perception. You see yourself emanate from these pictures as if you're the one creating it. You're the one who's creating those worlds. See, when you start turning your intelligence away from the subtler worlds where there's different beings, and you find yourself in these different worlds, these different journeys, adventures that don't rely on physicality, eventually you go towards an existence where you're the one who's creating the worlds, where you access the intelligence that's creating them, and you're still entertaining the notion as yourself being this individual who is one with that potential of creation. You're not the actual creator. You're still perceiving yourself as an individual creating. And this creator is just there to help your experience. This creator is not there for itself. It's just there to help you with your experience, to help you know the truth of who you are. So that's the only way to know who you are, because the truth of that creator is actually Brahman. But you find yourself as an individual being one with this creator, and then eventually merge both your identities with Brahman. In other words, you remove the illusion that you were an individual with a creator, or an individual that's living a life non-separate from the creator, because in truth, it's happening right now. You're never separate from the creator. When I say creator, I mean just this intelligence that's enabling you to perceive something different, so different that it believes itself to be a limited form amongst many other limited things. Remove yourself from being in a subtle body and start to experience the flashes of knowledge that's happening in your awareness. You're no longer perceiving yourself as an individual subtle body in all these different subtle worlds. You no longer experience yourself as this limited being who's physical in nature. That experience is completely gone. And because everything is happening in awareness, in this now moment, those things no longer exist. They're not out there, and they're not something that remains out there when you leave it. No, as soon as you leave, as soon as you let it go, it's gone. It doesn't exist. It's never there, because everything is happening in your awareness. This is what it's like to experience the causal world. Things become so causal that they eventually slip into deep sleep where there's no projection at all. You're just in a suspended animated state, a potential, something that's not actually in physical existence, but just holds itself as this potential that can be expressed into something more subtle or physical. That's what we call the causal world in Vedanta. That's the Anandamaya Kosha. We just talked about the Annamaya Kosha, which is the perception of physicality, or you can say a gross body. We just talked about the pranamaya kosha, the energy body, the way your attention merges from physicality to energy, the energy that made up the matter. We talked about the manomaya kosha, the mental space, where you hold yourself as a subtle body, experiencing all these different subtle worlds, all these different beings, all these different experiences that many people have had. And then you find yourself in the causal worlds, the very nature of what the subtle worlds and physical worlds actually were. They just were made up of causal worlds, or causal snapshots, or causal events, or a superposition of pictures that turns into or crystallizes into matter. And then there's a complete causal world, which is known as the Anandamaya Kosha, or the bliss sheath. That potential, you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are. You don't know who you are in that potential because there's nothing to know. There's nothing in physical existence, so you can't even know the bodies. You can't even know yourself as this individual. It's a suspended state. It's really nothing, but because you're not aware of your true self, there is no knowledge of anything. It's just you're resting in a potential. The thing is, you can never get lost in that potential. You can never get lost in that potential because there's hidden forces that can either take your attention away from that potential and expose your true self or expose Brahman, or there's the hidden forces that takes your attention and pulls it away from that potential and goes into the perception of subtlety. Because that's the only way, that's the only place attention can go. It can either go onto Brahman or back into subtlety. That's just the nature of existence. If there's only pure awareness, then if something appears not to be pure awareness, then it means that they're experiencing the subtlety experience or they're experiencing the physical experience. This potential is not really an experience to be explained. You can't even say it's an experience of absence, even though that's what's most commonly talked about in Vedanta and taught by teachers. It's not really that. And you can't say there's absence because to say absence means that there's something that you can compare absence to, like presence. Because there's no knowledge of presence and there can't be any knowledge of absence either. So absence, it has to be a concept that has to be completely crossed out. So you can't explain that experience. It's just a potential. You can't even say that it's a potential. We only say that, in other words, we only say that it's a potential when there's something that now exists in physical existence. And we say, oh, okay, well, this had to have came from a potential. But from the point of view of the potential, physicality doesn't exist, subtlety doesn't exist, nothing essentially exists because you don't know anything. So we only talk about it as a potential or the experience of absence when we're experiencing something. So the question now becomes, where are you going to turn your attention? Are you going to turn it back into the subtle body, or are you going to turn it back into Brahman? Are you going to remove the vasanas, that hidden force that drifts your attention away from Brahman and back onto subtlety and physicality? You have to kill the vasanas. How do you kill vasanas? Break the conditioning. Because the force is the conditioning. The force is the very conditioning that's enabling you to see things as if they're physical, as if they're subtle. See, even when you reveal the truth of the subtle body, you only see yourself as that truth because now you can say, well, you're not the physical body, you're the subtle body. So you revealed a more truthful aspect of your existence. The thing is, that truth keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it gets deeper in your experience. So all of these experiences that you're having, that's quote unquote mystical, those are natural experiences to be had and is a natural occurrence before you experience Brahman, because you have to negate those sheaths. That's what negation means. Negation means exposing them in your direct experience and then letting them go and seeing a more truthful aspect of who you are. That's what negation means. In other words, it's just you going from experience to experience to experience and seeing that the experience that you once held is wrong, was false, and now revealing a more truthful aspect of what the experience actually was. So in other words, the experience that you're having as a physical body, experiencing physical, tangible things and feeling this cat, which is my other cat, as if it's an actual cat that's an actual body, it's no longer felt like that in the subtle world. And so you reveal something more truthful. This is the experience. I knew this experience, I just forgot it. This is the experience. And so when you're in that experience and you see things completely differently because your awareness is completely gone and turned away from physicality, you reveal a much more truthful aspect of you. You feel lighter, you feel joyful, you feel loving, experiencing these subtler, more pleasurable, more blissful worlds. But it's those blissful worlds that you have to experience to keep revealing the more truthful aspects of what those worlds are. Because if you're not experiencing those worlds, then you're experiencing the physical world. You're experiencing the physical world. How are you going to negate the physical world if you're not experiencing something much more subtler, revealing something much more truthful? This is what separates the practitioners from those who just entertain this intellectually. Those who entertain it intellectually tend to be caught up in a rule book. They tend to be dogmatic in their ways, even though Vedanta should be the less dogmatic thing ever, since it's explaining non-duality. There are no dogmas when it comes to non-duality, but they've made it a dogma. They've made it this rule book to be followed. Who knows the most about these concepts, these technical concepts? Those technical concepts are just meant for you to understand and to apply so that you see this world differently. Eventually, those concepts need to be let go of. If you're still holding on to them, you're still stuck with a diluted perception. This is why you must change your perception. You must fix it. Right now, it's incorrect. It's holding the wrong views. It's holding the wrong views, and you're seeing those wrong views, and you're experiencing those wrong views. You believe those wrong views. And here you are, believing the wrong view. Like I said, practice makes perfect. Literally. Expose these subtle worlds and see a more truthful aspect of who you are, and then turn away from those causal worlds, those subtle worlds, because you're craving something more deeper. You're trying to understand more truth. You're trying to reveal something that's more truthful, because you now understand physicality. Even when you're experiencing subtlety, you're understanding that there is such thing as physicality, but you're not experiencing it. And then when you leave those subtle worlds and go into the causal worlds, you see that you're not this quote unquote astral being, this subtle body that's experiencing subtle worlds, and that you're the very essence that created those worlds. You start to see that, okay, you're going deeper, and you know it. You know it in your experience. So once you know these experiences, you have to go deeper. You keep going deeper because you're yearning for something more deeper. You know that there can be deeper. You know that there's something that's more deeper, and you want to venture down more. All these words like panchamaya koshas, the different bodies, like the gross, subtle, causal body, the the different panchamaya koshas, all these concepts are just to explain those worlds. They're just there to explain reality. They're just there to explain the structure of reality. In other words, the structure is you having a perception of physicality right now. And then there's a part of that structure is you perceiving the subtle world in your perception. Part of that structure is experiencing the causal world. And then the causal world, those are all just part of that structure. They're just concepts to explain the structure of reality. And you have to experience what those structures, what those concepts are saying that make up the structure, to see in your experience where you have to go and how much negation there's left. They're concepts that tell you the structure so you know what to negate. And so when you start negating, or you start practicing by turning your attention inward and taking your conscious attention away from an intelligence that's enabling a false, deluded perception, enabling you to see that there's a physical world, you turn your attention away from all that, and you're going to start revealing subtler aspects of existence, the same existence that you're holding right now, because everything is right there in that existence. It's all happening in the present moment. That is the only moment that exists. That's where all the snapshots are, all the outcomes. Everything is there in that one moment. And what you're doing is you're experiencing those moments in a linear progression, because each moment is distinct and has a small variation from the next. They have that slight variation that's enabled that enables you to see a progression of linear events, a sequential set of events. And here you see cause and effects. It's just snapshots unfolding and you're lost in them. And now they're creating a world. And it seems as if there's linear progression when it's not. Things are never linear because it's all just happening in that formless awareness that has no location. But here you are introducing time and space. You're putting it into your equation, and now you're experiencing life as a series of cause and effects. When you're in those causal worlds, you start to see snapshots. Snapshots. Snapshots are just telling you that each moment is separated from the next. And it's never a case of the moment flowing into the next as if there's an actual flow through time. It's meant to let you know or tell you directly that those moments are in truth the same essence, but just appear to be different because it sees itself as different moments. It's like flashes of knowledge. It's like you being aware of whatever you're aware of in the split second and freezing it, and then whatever you're aware of next, freezing it, and now you have two separate snapshots that almost looks identical, but with a slight variation, and you know those two snapshots are the same thing because they're not truly different from each other. The content is just different, and the content, even though it's different, is made up of the same thing as the other snapshot. So it's like two pictures that's happening in your awareness, and you know that they're just pictures. You know that they're just pictures. That's what I refer to as snapshots. You see those snapshots flash. Where are they flashing? In your awareness. In your awareness, because there's only awareness. It's flashing. When this happens and you still kind of identify back and forth with the body, it'll feel like their third eye is pulsating because there's a tension that's kind of drifting through the body to the subtle body to the causal worlds. It's connected. It's like it's entangled within all those dimensions, and you can still feel the presence of the physical body that's pulsating. That's what happens when your third eye pulsates. It's just get lost in the pulsations and see that they're just snapshots and forget that you have a body, or still have access when you're seeing those snapshots, still have access to the body that's in the picture, and you feel the pulse. You feel like your conscious attention moving throughout those different dimensions. And it's all happening like so fast because that's what's happening right now. When you're perceiving yourself as a physical, tangible, solid entity, it just means that you're just stuck in those dimensions that have crystallized into a physical world. And you're not seeing what's happening in the subtle layers and the other subtle dimensions. See those snapshots flicker. When those snapshots are flicker, you're not the person that's outside of the flickering. The person is part of the flickering. There's no difference between the person and all those different objects. You see everything contained in that picture that's flashing from awareness. You see, if your experience is held like that, and that's what you're experiencing, those snapshots, it just means that you're now seeing yourself as consciousness, but still seeing some projection that's emanating, and you can like instantaneously get transported into a projection and see yourself as physical if that's where your attention goes. But if you hold that space where you're seeing the flashes and seeing the snapshots as an emanation, you hold that, you have to keep squeezing your attention to negate what's being projected. That's how you see yourself completely as the pure observer. We'll get there in just a second because that's quite of a process to explain. We'll talk about it briefly. If you don't squeeze your attention, in other words, use your viveka. Viveka. You ever heard of viveka? Viveka is the power of discrimination. That's what that power is. That's the power to discriminate the self from the non-self. You have to expose the snapshots, because those snapshots or those flashes of knowledge, you're seeing yourself now as an emanation. You've turned your attention away from physicality, away from subtlety, over to the causal worlds where you're seeing the snapshots, and you realize that there's more to go. You go deeper. Some people can't go deeper because they still need to purify the mind. In other words, remove the conditioning, remove that potential for the force, the vasanas to pull your attention back into the physical world, back into the subtle world. This is why practice becomes necessary. Reveal those snapshots and start to see that you're the observer behind the snapshots, because the person and everything that made up the story is held inside that snapshot. There are pictures, right? There's flashes of knowledge of something, knowledge of a body, knowledge of a house, knowledge of a cat, knowledge of a TV, knowledge of this camera. They're just knowledge that's happening in awareness. Take your viveka, your power to discriminate, and completely isolate that appearance of a snapshot back onto pure awareness and see yourself as the observer that's completely detached. You're so detached that you're not entangled in any of the functions that enable the perception of subtlety and physicality. You've negated those functions. You've negated the functions. You realize that, oh, those functions played out an experience that I once believed was physical, but now I know that that physical experience was false. It's negated that experience. It's revealed a much more truthful aspect of who it is. And it keeps doing that until it reaches the pure self. You use your viveka the entire time. You're using your viveka the entire time throughout the process. You need razor sharp viveka. In other words, you need the power or the mastery to squeeze your attention away, completely away from the illusion of change and the illusion of snapshots that perpetuate the experiences of all the different bodies. Use that viveka and completely isolate it so you can rest as the pure self. That's what it means to make the plunge into nirvikalpa samadhi. That's what it means to make the plunge. When you're making the plunge into nirvikalpa samadhi, you're exposing turiya. Okay? You're exposing turiya. You have not slipped into some samadhi or nirvikalpa samadhi where you're not experiencing the projection. You're now exposing the projection as who you are. In other words, you're seeing the emanation of yourself that's non-separate from who you are, which is awareness. You see, when you're in the causal worlds and the snapshots are flashing into manifestations, you know that there's some pure observer behind it, right? But you haven't quite fully isolated those snapshots because you still see yourself as an individual experiencing the snapshots, and that knowing that there's some observer behind that individual, right? That's what it really means to be an individual. You've separated yourself from others. So it's like when that happens, it's your identity, your false identity being merged into your true identity. But to expose turiya, or the underlying observer, it has to be observing something. So if it's observing a projection and it's completely identified with this observer, then it means that you're seeing yourself as an emanation. You're seeing a body emanate. In other words, you're seeing this human body emanate from yourself while knowing there is only yourself. Here you now see the snapshots in fluidity, but it's all completely unified with your awareness, and the experience unfolds that way. It's in completely unbroken motion. In other words, it's completely still and unbroken, but yet you're seeing a projection of there being the appearance of separation and linearity. But you know that the truth of that is completely timeless. Because you're timeless. The experience itself is timeless. The experience itself is dimensionless. The experience itself is faultless. The experience itself is non-separation. There is only one, and that is who you truly are. That is what that truly exists. There is only eternity. You know this when the projection is running and you see it as a projection. If you're there, you're no longer entangled in the functions of the mind. So you no longer feel as if you're a limited being feeling something or as an individual experiencing something. You're not experiencing as the individual, you're experiencing yourself as infinite Brahman. You're experiencing yourself as pure consciousness. You're experiencing yourself as Turiya, the underlying observer. Why the underlying observer? Because you're observing different states purely detached from it while being those states itself, because the states are made up of you. You are the truth. It's like you're in pure observer mode and you're just observing and witnessing nothing else. That's all that happens. That's all that's happening. It appears to be happening, but you know that it's not happening. You see yourself as an observer seeing a projection, knowing that that projection is just being contained in this pure singularity that's completely still and empty. But because the projection is there and you see it emanating out of yourself while holding yourself to being pure consciousness, you know that without the projection, without the emanation, you can't know who you are. That is what we refer to as self-knowledge. When we have self-knowledge, it's because you're knowing your truth. But without the projection, you no longer know your truth. And so we can't say that it's self-knowledge anymore. That truth of not knowing who you are, but is completely, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like you know nothing. You know nothing. You know nothing. It's beyond witnessing. You know nothing. You lose your truth. You get lost in infinite consciousness. You get so lost that you're just infinite. So you can't explain the experience anymore. Because to really be infinite means you cannot compare yourself to anything that's finite. You have to completely let go of the concept or the appearance of finite things. And to completely let go of that means that the experience itself is incomprehensible, it's inconceivable, it's indescribable, it's unknowable. That is Nirguna Brahman. That is the final highest truth. The highest truth is that nothing is actually happening. Even when things appear to be happening, there is nothing happening. That is the final truth. That's when you go beyond witness consciousness. What it means to go beyond witness consciousness is knowing that the truth of witness consciousness is Nirguna Brahman. Just like knowing that the truth of the physical body is the subtle body. Just like knowing the truth of the subtle body is the causal body. Just like knowing the truth that the causal body's truth is Turiya. Just like knowing that Turiya or witness consciousness is actually Nirguna Brahman. That is the highest truth. You can see that if that's the highest truth, then witness consciousness is the gateway to non-duality. So not only do you have to negate the physical body, not only do you have to negate the subtle body, not only do you have to negate the causal body, which means to reveal all of them and completely turn your attention away from them, negate them, let them render non-existent, and then experience the truth of Turiya, of witness consciousness, the background observer that you truly are right now, you just don't know. Your consciousness is immersed in this physical body. Practice, remove the conditioning, remove the vasanas, expose the underlying observer, because that is what you need to expose before the truth of non-duality, pure non-duality. That is the gateway. Witness consciousness must be experienced as your own natural self permanently before you can know the highest truth, which is to not know the highest truth at all, to completely get lost in the highest truth. The highest truth is always the truth. That's the crazy part. It's always the truth. Even when there appears to be duality, it's always the highest truth right now. You just don't see it that way. This is why practice becomes necessary. This is why you have to turn your experiences into truthful experiences. Once you turn them into truthful experiences, you start experiencing things differently. If you're not experiencing things differently, you're stuck in the anamaya kosha. You're stuck in a deluded perception. You're stuck knowing yourself to be a physical body when all of that is not really true. You have to reveal the more subtle aspects of yourself to reveal the highest truth, because those are the truths that need to be negated to see the highest. You're immersed in, you're always immersed in truth. The only problem is you've turned that truth into untruth and now believe that untruth to be truth. You have to take that untruth and turn it back into a truth. And this is why your perception needs to change. It needs to be corrected. It needs to be so corrected that you realize that nothing ever needed to be corrected because everything was actually perfect. This is why you can have your own beliefs about reality. You can believe reality to be a certain way. It's all fine because there is only perfection. See, once you put your beliefs onto it, you've turned yourself into an individual and now forget that everything is perfect. And so now you believe things to be imperfect. And I'm telling you that things are always perfect. Even when there seems to be imperfections, things are always perfect. So you can't take life or reality too seriously. If you're not taking life or reality too seriously, then it means that you're more accepting. You're more accepting. You've accepted the world as it is. And you see why it's important to see the world that way in order to start experiencing a more truthful aspect of who you are. Because if you're not seeing it that way, you're lost. You're lost in the perception of physicality, where you believe yourself to be a physical being and now believe that you need to protect yourself at all times because that is who you are. And I'm saying that that is not who you are. And if that is not who you are, then don't take that identity too seriously. That's not to say don't do what you have to do, but just do it with mindfulness. Do it knowing that the truth is actually much more greater than that. And that itself should help cultivate more acceptance. Align yourself to that truth, right? In the comment section, I'll put the video of how to experience Brahman, which is just a video that explained it at a high level. We'll talk about how to experience Brahman, or how to experience the subtle aspects of yourself in much more granular detail in upcoming videos. But again, this video is slowly just about the experience of Brahman and the experiences that you have leading up to that truth. Because if you're not experiencing a much more subtle aspect of who you are, then it just means that you're perceiving things physical. And if you're perceiving things physical, it means that you're just holding the most diluted form of perception possible. You've completely turned formless consciousness into a limited actual thing. And because you've considered it to be an actual thing that's limited, you now see suffering. You see suffering. You feel pain. You feel depressed. You feel sad. You feel that things are not really going your way. I'm telling you to try to break that conditioning and see yourself as something far greater so that you can really accept the world as it is, because everything is perfect.